Good morning. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Come on in, come on in. Have a seat. Thank you so much for joining us for our Fomo No Mo session, which is the fear of missing out. So I'm assuming that if you're here, you have a fear of missing out on something. Glad you didn't miss out on this session. My name is Jade Simmons, and I am joined by some amazing panelists today. We're going to be talking and tackling this issue of fearing what we're going to miss out in terms of our careers, in terms of our livelihoods, our lives, our home lives where music and arts are concerned. And we're going to give you some insights onto how we've done things a little bit differently in hopes of encouraging you and empowering you to think about all the amazing opportunities and routes that you have to carve your own path in this incredible field that we call the arts. And I hope that by the time you leave, you'll feel inspired to do things differently, not out of obligation or out of fear, but because you can, which I think is a really powerful distinction to make. How many of you, just so I know who we're speaking to, were in the last session? Okay, good. So I want to make sure we make some tie-ins from that. There were some really important insights that I think will flow well into here. There's, of course, question and answer mic right there. We also have Slido. If you have questions as we are speaking, please go ahead and submit them. We may answer them in real time, or we may save them until the end as well. But I would love for this to be extremely interactive. So even as we're speaking, if you're thinking of something that you want to add to, counter, just slip your hand up and head to the mic, because I'd love to be able to interject as we go. Again, my name is Jade Simmons. I am a concert pianist and a professional speaker. I'm also an author, a minister, a coach, and I've had the incredible privilege of carving out an extremely colorful career that has me impacting on and away from the stage. I'd love to see you this afternoon. I'll be doing the closing plenary and talking more about that, but I want to shift now and focus to the other amazing, incredible musicians on the stage. We have Laura Downs, pianist. You may have heard of her. I'm going to let her introduce herself in a moment. We also have Edith Yoakley. So Laura, go ahead and tell us who you are, what you do.
Good morning. I am likewise a pianist, concert pianist, I guess we still say that, because we play concerts and they're on the piano. I'm also a writer, broadcaster, podcaster, mentor, host, radio host, curator, I think, producer. I think I'm something new every day, honestly. I'm a mom, too. I'm a world traveler. I'm super busy. I also feel intensely grateful. I make a moment every day for the gratitude of this amazing career that I have that just lets me follow my passions and my curiosities and, take other people along with me on the ride. Oh, I'm also a Sphinx Medal of Excellence laureate from 2016.
That's right. Yeah.
I am Edith Dawn Yoakley, and I'm a professional violinist. I live in Chicago, and I started a company called DJViolin.com.
Can you put your mic up a little closer?
Oh, sorry about that. Is that better? Sorry. I don't know why my voice dropped when the mic came towards me. Okay. I started a company called DJViolin.com in 2009 upon moving back to Chicago from New York, and I travel around the country playing with DJs and creating playlists and doing innovative performance. I'm a mother as well, and I teach, and I play with a violin group, an electric violin group, all female, called the Cover Girls Violin Show. I play with the Chicago Sinfonietta. So as I was telling my fellow panelists, I have a Frankenstein existence, but it is such a blessing because, like Laura was saying, it allows me to do my passion and be my authentic self and share that and be the light for others.
So both of these ladies are extremely modest, and in typical artist fashion form, they didn't tell you anything about how awesome they actually are. And so Laura has acclaimed recordings, including America Again, selected by NPR as one of the top 10 albums that saved 2016. Okay, you talk about impact away from the stage. That's not it. Her music, y'all, her music was hailed as, I quote, a balm for a country riven by disunion. by the Boston Globe. Let me tell you something. Artists are uniquely designed to impact on and away from the stage. You will hear me say this later this afternoon. If you have limited yourself to your instrument, you are doing the entirety of the world a huge disservice. So you are meeting artists today who have decided, thank you ma'am, amen, that's right, who have decided that their music deserves audiences larger than the people sitting in front of them. And so that's who you're hearing. Miss Edith here, who was like, yeah, I play with a few DJs and stuff, and I go to clubs. No, listen, Edith is not only a member of the Chicago Sinfonietta and the Soulful Symphony in Baltimore, she's performed with such artists as, now this is where you want me to say Andre Watts, right? This is where you want me to say, what's the violin guy? Joshua Bell. That's what you want me to say. I'm not going to tell you that. Here's who she's performed with. CeeLo Green, J-Lo, Common, y'all know Common? Barry White, Mos Def, Nancy Wilson, Andrea Bocelli. We got one in there, right? Sheila E., Smokey Robinson, Aretha Franklin, Donnie McClurkin, Richard Smallwood, Shirley Caesar, Dennis DeYoung of Styx, Diana Ross, and the Supremes, okay? She has appeared on, not just NPR, right? Laura, we've done NPR, right? She has appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show, the Today Show, Late Night with Conan O'Brien, as well as The Voice, okay? Listen, it's very important for you to understand something that I think is a very important distinction we need to make. I was in the last session just for the tail end of it, and I think one of you had a wonderful question about, you know, that stigma, right, of either I make it and I play it in the orchestra, or what we are here to do is take away the or. There is no more or. If you're still living by an or, that's your decision. That's your fault. You have an opportunity in this day and age to be multiply influential. You have an opportunity in this age to have influence beyond the concert hall. So I want us to get rid of putting these levels here. That first chair orchestra is up here, administration is here, teaching is down there. If you are so gifted to do all of these things, we just encourage you to embrace it, and you can see the type of influence and impact that you can have. I want to ask a couple of questions to get the ball rolling, and then I hope this will generate your own questions as well. So as young concert artists, when we were starting out, I think we can admit we had a very specific vision of what our careers look like. Now, Edith, I'm going to just go out on a limb and imagine that when you were practicing your scales on your violin, you weren't like, one day I'm going to play with CeeLo Green. So from your original vision, first of all, tell us what your original vision was, what you thought it would mean to be a professional violinist, and take us through that moment, that turning point where you knew, I think I'm going to do things a little bit differently.
It's an interesting question. I thought that I would play with an orchestra. I hoped that I would be able to solo. I love chamber music. I'm doing all of that now, but in grad school at the University of Michigan, I started to play with a mariachi band. And that's when I learned about this thing called improvisation. So from that, I spun that into jazz, and I was like, ooh, this is kind of cool. And I was like, well, how can I get classical people and young people, when I started teaching, how can I get them interested in playing their scales so that they can do something else, not just play concertos and stuff? And that's when I thought of melding jazz, hip-hop. Actually, you know what? I saw Branford Marsalis. I don't know if you guys know Buckshot LaFunk. And that was something that really influenced me in my undergrad years. And so I just did that with the violin. So that was the moment.
Laura, your moment where you went from maybe only imagining, I'm assuming, but maybe only imagining, you know, Rachmaninoff Concerto No. 2 with New York Philharmonic to, I'm going to meld all sorts of the diaspora of American music, of ethnic music. I'm going to put all this stuff in what I do. Where was your switching point?
So can I just, you know, you just said what was your vision of your career?
Yeah,
when
your
you
original
were
vision. Mm-hmm.
So vision, you know, kind of has different interpretations. There's your inner vision, which, you know, you're lucky if you have that when you're really young. And then there's like your vision, like what you see in front of you. And I was just thinking when you were answering, one of the things I remember, so one of the worst parts of my youth and my musical youth, honestly, I have two sisters, and there was a period of time when we were trotted around as like a performing act with matching dresses and a lot of fighting, and it was awful. It was awful. We all hated it. And I remember during those years, you know, there was like some success and concerts and things, and the only vision that there was of anything similar to that was the Lebec sisters. And I remember thinking, you know, like we all wanted to be the Lebec sisters. At the same time, we're having this horrible time, you know, doing what we're doing. So I think there's part of it that when you're really young and you're just on this path, all you can see is what's in front of you. So it's so important to look for, you know, a wide variety of examples and models. Anyway, for me, the moment was very simple. I had studied in Europe, you know, from my early teens. And so I was very, very well trained in a very traditional fashion. And I sort of ran away from home and came back to the States with a boyfriend, and everybody was dismayed. And there was an exhibit at the Guggenheim Museum called The American Century. And it was this 20th century retrospective of American everything, like American life, culture, politics, music. There was the music in the middle of all this other stuff. And it was just this intense light bulb for me about how things connect. I had never thought about how things connect. And from that moment forward, my vision was about, you know, illustrating the world through my music, pulling all of the things together that create it and feed out of it.
I think, at least for me, when I think about the original vision, it was very traditional. I remember watching, PBS used to play the finals of the Van Cliburn piano competition, if you remember that. And I remember watching that and seeing Van Cliburn, you know, on stage give the big silver cup, and I knew that's what I was going to do. But what you got to understand is I started playing piano. I mean, I was old, y'all. I was like 8 years old. Y'all know that's like over the hill in our industry. And so I didn't know that technically I was going to be starting too late to go after this vision. So that's all I did was go after that. And I'll mention another story later. I'm trying to make sure I don't tell the same stories to now and then later. But I had a moment where I started talking to my audiences in between the performances. And, you know, they thought it was so novel, but I was just trying to catch my breath because I had programmed pieces that were way too big because I was trying to impress people. And I think as a Black female classical pianist, I felt like I had to be extra classical, whatever that means. So I was playing like not just one Chopin etude, but 5 of them, you know, and like the biggest Beethoven sonatas and the Rachmaninoff sonata. Of course, you start with the Bach, not just a prelude and fugue, but a toccata and fugue, because I had to prove that I belonged to be there. You know, I was supposed to be in the room. And I was tiring myself out. And so I started telling stories in between the pieces to catch my breath. And long story, very short, which I'll elaborate on later, those stories completely changed the trajectory of my career. And I started being sought after for the speaking as well. And that took me into a career outside of music. You know how they say a prophet's never, you know, valued in their own hometown. This is probably my first art speaking engagement in, well, how many years now? And so these companies like, you know, Hershey and Microsoft and Beachbody will bring me in, but maybe the NPR conference they used to have was like, well, we'll have to see, you know, if we can have you come in or not. But it was this, yeah. But it was a big change. It was a big change in realizing that my voice, something that I had quieted because I thought people only want to hear me play. They don't want to hear me talk. And so I was literally just playing, and once I started speaking and connecting, I think they said in the last session that the best artists are engaging artists. They're teaching artists by nature, and that completely changed everything, and I would never go back. Along the same lines, do you guys, I know this is called Fomo No Mo, but do you guys have a oh, hell no moment? Like that moment where you were doing something, now, don't play like you don't know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that moment where you're going on one trajectory and somebody says something or it just flips you out and you go, I cannot keep doing this way. if I keep playing this way, like we hate it, we're trying to be the Lebec sisters, but we hate this, I cannot do this anymore. Do you have a moment where you knew what you were doing was not going to cut it anymore and you had to do things differently? I know, Edith, you said, yeah, we're going to give you time to think. I remember you said that. Do you have that, Laura?
Sorry, I'm just cracking up because there was actually a moment when I said I cannot do this anymore, and I broke, I broke the piano because my sister and I were practicing this Mozart concerto, the two piano concerto, and as I said, there was a lot of fighting, and I just couldn't. And we had these old. This was in Vienna. And these old. I probably couldn't have broken the Steinway, but we had these old pianos, and I just slammed my fist down, and literally the music desk broke in half, and that was kind of the end of that. I remember her face. She was like, but then, so that's a very literal answer to your question. Yeah. After that, I think I didn't really have any moment of sort of giving up on something. I just plunged forward, and I attribute a lot of my chutzpah, as we say, to my weird education, because we were homeschooled. I didn't have any sort of history of like curriculum and this is how we do things. So I just I don't know. I had this way of I think convincing people to do things my way. Honestly, not out of any kind of foresight. I just I remember when I made my first recording. It's a long time ago now. And I had this vision that came out of that museum exhibit about sort of an American album. This was long enough ago that when I put this idea forward, they said, oh, no, you can't do that because it has to be all one composer so that it can go in the bin. Otherwise it's going to go in the miscellaneous bin. And, no one
want to be in the miscellaneous
bin.
Don't
want to be and I said, no, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And this is what I really want to do. And somehow they let me do it. And now, isn't it crazy to think about a time when a compilation album was outside of the box or, miscellaneous?
Mm-hmm. Miscellaneous.
Yeah.
So a couple of lessons there. When you are breaking your instrument, it is time to do things differently and take another path. We prefer you not get to the point where you break your piano. Yes? Edith, you've had a little time to think, and you can reframe that question however you need to, but was there a moment where you just really knew, I've got to forge my own path here, or this way that I've been doing things is not going to work?
Yes and no, because I feel like I'm still doing everything that I'd set out to do, which is a blessing, but I'm doing those things differently. So when I came back to Chicago from New York, I was playing with bands, and I was playing with orchestra and a quartet, and I was like, oh, this is cool, this is fun. I was playing shows, and I got a little bit bored. And I guess it would be the boredom, because it was all really good work. I was having a great time, but it was like, I don't know that this is really feeding my soul. So then I started to do the improvisation and turn it into an actual business. And I guess that was my aha moment.
That's a huge aha moment, because I think a lot of our focus is always on the audiences and what we're doing for the community, and we rarely stop to ask anymore, do I still actually like what I'm doing? Show of hands, how many of you are and I won't tell your teachers, I promise. How many of you are currently playing music that you do not love? Anybody? Stop it. Listen. I remember this point when I was playing, going crazy playing these Beethoven sonatas, because I was still in that, jump the hurdle recital was what I called them, right? You got to play the Bach, jump the hurdle, right? You got to play the Beethoven, cleared that one. Or, clip my foot on the back of that hurdle. And I remember I was programming these Beethoven sonatas, and I didn't like the second movement of one of them. Like, shame, right? I just didn't. I loved the first movement. Could not wait to get to the third, but I hated the second. But we knew that in traditional performance, you needed to program the whole recital, the whole sonata. Guess what? The audience didn't really like that second movement either. You know how I know? Because the mood would kind of lag, and they were just waiting until we got to the finale, too. You know what I started doing? This is blasphemy. I started omitting the second movement. Oh my God. Do you know how much changed for me as an artist when I realized there are no rules here? I can play what I wanted. And when I look back in history and saw Beethoven wasn't even playing all the movements. You know, so I think so much of what we do has been set up for us by these preconceived ideas of what a concert experience should look like, and we're still following this rubric that the composers themselves didn't even set up. Why are we just now getting to improvisation when Mozart was improvising out of the womb, right? So it was like this huge moment of realizing I didn't have to do what Andre Watts was doing. Even though he was like the only black pianist that I was seeing at the time, I didn't have to do exactly what he was doing. Oh my gosh, we went to school together. Oh my God, good to see you, yay, oh my God. Oh my God, don't tell her half of what I'm saying, please. But there was, a huge moment. I will lead with the story to get you to this next question, which is, what was the big move that you made that forever really changed the course of things? We've said that in a certain way, but sometimes there's a certain room that you ended up in or a space that you were in and you realized, oh, I need to be different or behave differently, or there's some new opportunities available. For me, it was not necessarily a happy moment, but it was one of those big ahas. I was webcast hosting the Tchaikovsky competition in Moscow. And so you have to understand, this was a really big deal because I had been webcast hosting for the Clyburn. So you had this black face who was on the screen telling people about European music. I mean, it was really cool, right? And so I was the person telling them how to listen to Mozart, and this is how you should hear Beethoven. And so I was invited to go to Moscow to do this. And after we got done, there was this big supper. And it had the who's who of classical music was in this room, and I was dressed to the nines, y'all, because you got to show up right? So I'm dressed head to toe, and I'm in this room with, the cream of the crop. Valery Gergiev was the host of the dinner. To his right was Anna-Sophie Mutter, violinist. On this side was Van Cliburn himself. John Curigliano was there with his partner, Marca. This was the last supper of classical music. Do you see what I'm saying? And so there are all these guys, and whatever big name violinist, big name violist, they were all in that room. And I was in the room, and I remember thinking, oh, I've made it. Like, this is the room I am here. You could not tell me nothing. You hear, I pulled up to that table like I belonged. And I remember they started doing toast, going around and doing toast. And Valery Gergiev stood up and he said, I want to shout out. He didn't say shout out, but I want to, acknowledge everyone in the room. And he said, I'm so excited because next summer, Anna-Sophie's student is going to be soloing with me with the Moscow Philharmonic, and they're all cheers, it's so wonderful. And then Anna stands up, and she says, oh my gosh, this is so great, because I remember when last spring, when we were summering in Vienna together, and our homes are right by each other, and she's talking the big name violinist, and she's like, oh my God, it's so great, because we're going to be together next week. And then Clyburn gets up. And he says, I remember, Johnny, this is John Curigliano he's talking to. He says, Johnny, I remember when your father, who was the concert master of the New York Philharmonic, and I was soloing, and your father brought you back to my dressing room, and you showed me one of your compositions. And they're all going around the room, and they had stories that connected to each other. And they lived next to each other, and they had summer homes next to each other, and their yachts were parked next to each other. And I remember thinking, I'm not related to nobody in here. I don't have a summer home next to her. And I'm thinking, if I just practice hard enough, Valery Gergiev's going to book me. And I'm realizing, actually, no, he's booking Anna-Sophie's student who he knows. Now, look. What I'm saying is not that the people in the room were not deserving. They were some of the best musicians in classical music. They just are. They deserve to be the best. They play, they practice, they're awesome. But there was a moment when I realized I'm in this room, I'm sort of at the table, but I'd realized that there was just a limit to how far I was going to be able to go, and that I could either keep trying to bust through this invisible ceiling, or I could leave and decide I was going to do things differently. It was one of the most painful, eye-opening moments because I was in the room. It had looked like I'd made it, but I realized I wasn't really going to be in that interconnection no matter how hard I practiced or how hard I tried. It was probably the best devastating moment I've ever had, though, because I was forced then to come back and carve an entirely different path. Do you have a moment like that where you showed up somewhere, or maybe even you realized, oh my God, I'm so different, this is a good thing?
That's a really moving story. And I don't know that I have anything similar, and I'm maybe not even answering your question. But I was thinking the other day, I was on some long drive, and I was thinking about how all of the things that have ended up not well for me, you know, like professional relationships or situations that I've had to get out of, but still the getting into them was really important. And I was thinking about kind of the people who have opened all of the doors for me, even if they weren't the right doors, right? Because you have to walk through those doors and then choose the one that's there or there or there or there, right? I went through sort of a breakup, I guess, a few years ago with a record label, and it was absolutely around a personal relationship within that company that was toxic. And I felt, I think I felt ungrateful walking away from it, and sort of like I hadn't done enough to accommodate, to change myself so that I could have been okay in that relationship. And the moment that I was out of it, I realized that, you know, it was doomed to failure. These were two people who could not see eye to eye or collaborate, and that I was having to hide half of my stuff under the table because it wasn't meeting with, you know, support. And, you know, the very next relationship that I forged let me do the amazing things. Let me do the America Again album, actually, which would not have happened where I was. So, I mean, yeah, I think it's that same. I think there's always a little bit of, in that situation that you described, there is some feeling, at least for me, of failure. You know, it's not even, whatever you realize about the room that you're in or the group that you're in, it's still like, well, maybe if I had just done something different, if I'd tried harder, if I'd been different. But no, you have to know when to walk out.
That's good. Edith, you actually have a question that's come in for you on Slido as well. We're going to open up now to questions. If you have questions for us, please make your way to the microphone. Please don't be shy. You can ask us just about anything, but I'm going to start just with this question we have already on Slido. Edith, it says, what activities are good for musicians to gain the confidence to leave traditional classical to embrace and network with modern American music?
That's a very good question. I would say that you need to embrace the classical and kind of conquer the classical first, because it will give you facility and the vocabulary to do other things and to assimilate other genres of music together. So I think finding chord progressions, YouTube has tons of chord progressions for jazz and bossa and all that stuff. If you just get a bunch of those and start playing along and listening. One thing that I believe really helped me was Suzuki, and I'm sure a lot of you started with Suzuki, and it's all by ear. So when I did go into the mariachi thing, it wasn't written. I was able to hear the chord changes. I might not know what those chords are because I'm not a jazz musician like that, but it allowed me to be able to move in that medium. So.
Hi, my name is Chisama Ku. I'm based out of New York. What advice would you give to someone who, for example, works a 9-to-5 that's not, it's not music related, but they have a desire to be a musician and they have that fear that, I have to work this job because America and I have to make this money, but I feel like I'm missing out on things I could be doing, but you still are like, you have that uncertainty. Like, what if I make this career switch and it's not as profitable as I thought it would be? It's just like that fear of missing out, but also that fear of not winning.
So I'm going to push you a little bit and say that a lot of our fears are based in actions that we haven't even taken yet. So you say you're working a 9 to 5. That's awesome because you got like 6 to 11 or midnight to go out and gig. And you want to get your feet wet and do what you say you want to be doing. A lot of us are still imagining or thinking or worrying about what we could be doing. Why not try to be very diligent about those hours we do have and take, since you've got a stable job, you've got the luxury that some artists don't have of being able to experiment. So when you start experimenting, you don't have to do anything traditional. You can simply start with doing the wildest thing you want to do, see if there's an audience for it, find other musicians to collaborate with, and be intentional and know that 6 o'clock on is my artistic time, and I will spend the next month, 2 months, 3 months, put a goal on each quarter, and decide how you're going to branch out and just see first. And then what you do is you start matching your income. When your gigging is matching your income, then you can start going part-time, and then quarter time or whatever they do. I've never worked a 9 to 5. I absolutely refuse. So I don't even know what y'all people are out there dealing with, okay? Listen. So when you start the creative process, just take note. Take note of what people are responding to and use that as fuel for your confidence that you are designed to offer that experience. Yeah?
Can I say something too? When I moved back to Chicago after grad school, I was really lucky to meet certain people who gave me names and sat down with me and said, hey, this is who you need to talk to. This is this contractor. This is this contractor. And like maybe 3 years later, I ran into the person who gave me all these names. And they were like, oh my gosh, I see you're doing really great. You're playing all these shows, all of this stuff. And I was like, well, yeah, you gave me all of the information I needed. And then they told me something. People do that for people a lot, but people don't follow through. So if you can get yourself into the circles or meet the people who know the people where you want to get to, listen to them, take everything that they say, write it down, and be diligent, and I think you can actualize your dream.
I just like what you said about using the time you have, because there's so many things that happen in your life that condense your time and take many hours of it away. Like, for example, having a child, traveling, the kind of traveling that you have to do when you are touring. I mean, you would not believe how many hours disappear. So you could be on a plane from 9 to 5, and then, your 6 to midnight is when you can do all of your practicing and rehearsing and everything else.
We have another question here, but I want to go here. I just want Evander to know we're coming to you. This is a great question. Go ahead.
Hi. So Jade and Lara and Eve, you guys are amazing. I'm grateful for your courage and your fearlessness. I care less what Valerie Gergiev and Anne-Sophie Mutter think of you than what the children and the young musician think of you. There's a photo of Barack Obama right after he was elected in a public school, and the way the children in this public school in Chicago are looking at him is incredible. And that's the opportunity that you have through the lives you've chosen to live and the choices you've made. And you will be those inspirations for that next generation. So that's much more important. Our kids I run an organization called Bravo Youth Orchestras in Portland, Oregon. We're part of the El Sistema movement. And our kids, we look like the United Nations. Our kids got to play with Joshua Bell, and they got to play with black violin. Which one do you think is the one that they talk about all the time? Black violin. So I applaud you for what you've done. I'm interested, what kind of supports did you all have as children that planted this? What supports and what opportunities did you have when you were young in those formative years that planted the seeds for the courage and the fearlessness and the choices that you made now in life?
That's a good question. I had very supportive parents who, although they were not musicians, fostered my gift. And really, the Suzuki thing is the thing that gave me the courage to branch out and do what I'm doing now. Because I know a lot of classical musicians who are like, well, how can you just listen to that and there's no music in front of you? How do you know what's coming next? And a lot of DJs ask me that. It's all because of your ear, so that would be my tool.
I think lack of structure, as I mentioned. No, honestly, it was wild. My family was wild, and I think the really positive thing was that my mom never hesitated to, like change the path if it wasn't right. There was a whole thing about, when we were like, she taught us to read and everything when we were really, really tiny, and so I never went to school because she took me to the school, and I was, I think, 4, and they said I should go into the second grade, and she knew that wasn't a good idea. So it was just very make it up as you go along, and that, at the time that was kind of rough, but I realize every day that's the foundation of who I am. Yeah.
Thank you again for saying that. It's really powerful to hear that back at us. I think parents were huge for me. I have some very dynamic parents. My mother is a devout Christian, and so faith was always really important to me growing up, and it was infused in everything that I did, whether or not I was in a faith-based setting. I don't even believe in separation, secular and sacred. He's everywhere, so that informs me. My father is a civil rights activist, and so my dad is definition angry black man. Like, you look up angry black, it's my dad. And he's very proud of it. He's going to write a book one day, and that's what it will be called. My father is still the guy he's old school. You will find him, we're from Charleston, South Carolina. Almost every day, if not every weekend for sure, you will find him on a street corner with signs telling you whatever he thinks about the current political setting. And he was the type of father that when we got to dinner every night, he would ask us, do you know what's going on in Israel? Do you know what's going on in Ethiopia? I mean, that's how he wanted us to be informed. And one of the biggest things he would say to me when I was learning to play piano, it was important for him that I had multicultural experiences. So I was in ballet, but I was in African dancing. I was, playing classical music, but I was listening to African drumming. He said to me, no matter how far you go in this field, he said, never forget all the people around you. He said, the stage hands, the janitor, the people who are rolling the piano on the stage. And he said, you make sure that you are respectful to them. And so today, I'm so proud to say that I have the most fun, not at the big donor receptions, but like talking to the guys behind the scenes. And let me tell you, you better be nice to the people rolling out the piano and tuning the instrument, you know what I'm saying? But one of the best reviews for me is always when a janitor will say, I wasn't in the room, but I was outside, and I heard what you were saying, and you were there for me. And so to me, that's why I harp on that idea of influence beyond the stage, because I think we can sometimes get so caught up in the people we think we're playing for, and we're not remembering that our whole existence is to go beyond ourselves. It is to be something for someone else. So when you mention those kids, when I would play school concerts, to come into an all-black school and be with a white personal assistant, and they would assume that the personal assistant was going to play the piano. But then when I sat down to see them go, it was like you could see their whole world opened up in that moment. So those things were huge for me, those types of influences. You're not Evander, are you? Okay, I just want to make sure I answer Evander's question. He said, as a black man, how would you suggest having a diverse, fulfilling career in the arts, this is good for us as mothers, while also being a strong father and husband and not letting my dreams hurt that? Loaded question. Loaded. Is that you? Okay. So how are we balancing what I always call your creative baby, which is a real thing, and your real babies, which could care less that you need to practice, that you have a flight to catch, that you have not learned that second movement to that Beethoven? How do you balance that without letting it hurt your dreams and hurt your home life as well? Yeah?
I want to say one of the things that I think proudest of and happiest about. So when my kids were tiny, I tried really hard to really make my work invisible to them. I would practice in the middle of the night. I would travel, when they were with their grandma. It was not part of our narrative. And somehow they became aware, I think, of the importance of what I do in the world at large. And now they respect it and they value it so much. One of my favorite moments in our house, the piano is always just right in the living room. I don't have a studio, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm practicing, and my son and his friends, because all the kids are always at our house, and they're just like tearing around the house, and they were like running circles around the piano and completely ignoring me, which is awesome, right? Yeah. And I'm thinking, someday these kids are going to look back at their child and they're going to remember, that Simon's weird mom who is always playing the piano, like they're going to make some connection, to who I am in the world. And I just love that all these things can just coexist. It's really cool. The other thing that I think that we as artists, as creative people who are parents, I don't know, for you, I over-resisted pushing or even encouraging my kids very far into music. We tried, it didn't work, and I was fine. And now they've both turned around and become intensely creative beings in totally different fields. And that to me is like, I did something amazing there. Yeah.
I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she is very supportive of me, and for some strange reason thinks I'm famous. So that's by nothing that I say or do. But she plays the violin, and she just thinks it's what I do. It's just my job. And so we don't really have a problem. She lets me practice. She'll do her Legos. And she's also an amazing artist, so she draws a lot, and she'll draw while I'm practicing and paint. So,
can I tell a very funny story? So when Michael Jackson died, my kids were very worried about that. And we had conversations about how fame is difficult. Like it's, it makes people have sad lives sometimes. And, but you're famous, Mom. I'm like, no. It's fine. I'm not, no weirdness. Everything's fine. We're having this conversation in the grocery store because all the tabloids were, about Michael Jackson dying. So we're talking about this, and this person comes up behind me and says, "Excuse me, are you Lara Down?" And my son's like, "See, Mom?" It was just like the funniest timing.
I'm going to say, share the dream. Share the dream. My husband, he's my high school sweetheart, so we've been together since we were 15. And when we were dating, I said, look, if we're going to be together, you're going to have to understand a few things. And he will tell you this is what I said, and this was at 15. And then when we finally got married at, I think, 22, 23, I said, listen, nothing's changing here. I'm still going to be gone every summer. I'm going to be at Interlochen or Indiana or wherever. So you got to decide now if that's what you want. And so he knew. Now, he didn't know what he was really getting into. I didn't even know. So he's been with me through the iterations. He's my greatest support. And I think for him being a black man, I wanted my kids to see him in a certain light. But I want to tell you, your kids don't see you as a black man. They just see you as dad. So whatever extra pressures that come with that label, because you prefaced your question with that, let it go. But when I say share the dream with your kids, my kids know what I'm going after. They know that mommy is going after huge things. I always tell them that. And you'll know that it's working when they start to care less, right? So it's good that they love what you do. My kids are very proud of me. They do see me practicing. I do have to shoo them away sometimes, or sometimes I let them come in and, like you said, run around. But you'll know you're on track when sometimes I'll be at these big stadiums, 10,000 people in the room, and they're standing ovation, which they give you standing ovations much easier outside of classical than in classical. I'm telling you, that's the way to go. So they give you the standing ovation, and everybody loves you, and you're getting paid serious money, and you're driving around, you're getting driven around in a car, and you got people, and you got assistants, and then you come home. And I've had that, red-eye flight from an event like that, where I'm home in time to make breakfast and pack the lunches, and I'm in my robe, not looking glamorous at all, and I'll sit down and my son will say, "This is not how I like my fried egg." And I'm like, are you serious? I just had a standing ovation, and I said to my son, 10,000 people just gave me a standing ovation, and you're crying about this egg. And you know what he said to me? He said, "Mom, everybody has their opinion." But at that point, I knew I was doing okay. you know, that my son feels comfortable enough. He still wants his mom. He still expects his mom to be present. And the busier we get, you know, the harder that is. But I think if you share the dream, don't separate them from it. Let them see how important it is for you. Then they will say, Mom, you haven't practiced. Dad, you need to get in there and practice because you're much nicer when you get in your practice. They'll tell you that, right? So just share it. Share the dream. Be open. We have one more. Then I know we have to go.
Right. So once you finally break out of the practice room and you think you've gotten pretty good, how do you find an audience that's willing to pay and listen to you or support you?
How do you find an audience? Once you've broken out, you're doing weird, wild stuff. How do you find an audience that's willing to listen to you and support you?
I had the clubs, so it was kind of a captive audience. But then what happens is people hear you there, and they're like, wait, can you do this here? Can you do this at this corporate event? Well, can you create a whole concert around this? And so I guess it's placement. If you get in the right place, but you're trying to find out what that place is to begin with. Okay, so.
I mean, I think you put yourself out as widely as you can, right? And probably the easiest way to do that now is digitally. And I think you can grow your numbers fast. And then once you know, as you're doing that, I think it's really important to be interactive too, so that you're building a community of listeners, and you know, and things just spread. So you start small and it grows fast.
Can I interject? Okay, so I said my club thing. But how I got to that was I did internships when I was doing a music business degree at Northwestern, and I learned about cold calling. So when I was moving from New York to Chicago, I just called the hottest clubs, and you just keep going until someone says yes, and then you go in. So I don't know where you're based. Are you in New York?
I'm in Boston. I play classical and jazz. And
Classical jazz?
classical and jazz.
Oh, and jazz, okay. I mean, call different venues. Find as many venues as possible. Maybe even start at a church and have your friends come, something like that. Or maybe offer it as a free will offering for the church. Because you really just need an edifice at first. So you can get people to come in and listen. And then, like you said, build your digital list and all that stuff.
Where are you playing now?
Well, I just started writing my own music. So about the hell no moment, right? So I was on track to be like an orchestral bassist, and there was a moment when everyone was practicing like Heldenleben, and I really hate that excerpt. And I realized I don't think I can be a solely like orchestral musician. And so I told my teacher, and he said, I thought he was gonna be angry, but he said, you know, you should generate your own music. And so I've been writing my own music, and I put a house show together. But I mean, I'm trying to find something to kind
Have
of
you
carry
played
it
the
on.
house show yet?
Not yet. No, it's next week.
It's next week?
Yeah.
Okay, so play the house show. Be
Right.
amazing. Because you still got to practice for that, by the way. But so we've given you practical advice, but the spiritual advice that I truly believe is that you don't find an audience, your audience finds you. And so what I mean by that is whatever stage you're on, at this now, you've heard, when you hear this now, you can no longer go back to doing whatever you used to do. So once you start playing this house concert that you have coming up, you are commanded to put your full artistic self on display. Because if you cheat and just program what you think the audience wants to hear, then you're limiting yourself to an audience that only wants to hear that. But if you dare to go in the spaces you already have booked, I dare those of you who already have straight ahead classical concerts booked to do something different on that program. The audience will not get up and leave, I promise you. But whatever space you have, start doing the thing you want to do on that stage now. What happens is very slowly and wonderfully, the audience starts to interchange itself out. The people who only wanted the Mozart don't come back, and that's fine. But the people who wanted the Mozart and you continue to come back, and they spread the word. And over time, your audience begins to change. That audience then becomes your biggest ambassador, and they go out and fill the rooms for you. So if you combine that kind of belief with the practical advice, then you see those things start to happen quickly. I think we are coming to a close. There was one question we had left about balancing motherhood and financial responsibilities while still going after your dreams fearlessly. I'll just say that I do not believe you have to be a starving artist. I think there's profitability built into your art that you have not thought about. And so I think you have to think about ways that you can offer things that are profitable, which is going to go beyond just the concerts themselves. What else can you create that's a package deal? That's kind of how I got my start musically, is creating package deals. So people were bringing me in to play the concert, but then they were also keeping me there to speak at a university about career development, or bringing me in a day early to speak to school. Guess what? I could charge a whole lot more for that than if I was just coming in to play the concert. So be creative about profitable ways to scale your business. Anybody quickly? Financial responsibility, motherhood.
I mean, I think that's a great answer. Just, yeah, know your strengths and lean on all of them.
Agree.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much. Hope to see you at the final session. A lot of these things that we talked about just happened, will be a part of the keynote that I'm giving. And that will go from Rachmaninoff all the way to rap. So I look forward to seeing you there. All right, have a good day.